Hi, welcome to Shooting the Shift. I'm Bam. That's Matt.
Hey.
That's Bryn.
Greetings.
That's Milton.
Ooh.
And we've got a special guest today called Sam. Matt's going to tell you about him because he's dragged him into this.
Unfortunately.
Why is it? It's going to land on me, and I'm completely unprepared for this. Other than the fact that his name's Sam and he likes VWs and air-cooled, that's about all I've got.
But that's
all you need to know.
So we're getting it out of the way nice and early because...
Oh, I can guess what this week's subject is.
What is it, Milton?
Is it about BMWs?
That's the one, mate. It's
No.
about some German nonsense that makes no sense to anyone.
He was in the right country, at least.
Yeah, you're in the right sort of frame of mind, yeah.
Audi.
Yeah.
You guys are shit at introducing him. What you want to do is go something like, yo, he's the coolest cat. He chats the most gas. His life is all about air. It is Type 1 Sammy.
No, look. So this week, we are going to be talking about air-cooled engines and VWs. And I'm going to throw some air-cooled engine nonsense that I have researched into the episode.
He's trying to sound clever.
That it's not all just Volkswagen and Audi groups. There is a few Fiats in the mix for air-cooled engines as well.
If you go back far enough, you'll find a Porsche as well.
Yeah.
A lot of motorcycles.
Yeah, well, actually, when you said BMW, funnily enough, they do the flat twin. So
Are they still in to this day?
yeah, you can still buy that. You can still buy bikes that are air-cooled, but obviously now you just get little cute like coolers and little pumps and stuff. So, but I don't know a lot about bikes, so
I used to know a lot about bikes.
no.
I'm completely there. You go. I mean, it's like it's one of those things, isn't it? Like they're weird. Why? Even Bryn the engineer is kind of pulling a. He's kind of got a point. Why?
They're weird.
Well, the main, I mean, obviously, all joking aside, when it bowled back to being within the war, essentially like the Cuba wagons, which were like their off-road Beetles, glorified Beetles, basically like the amphibious style of thing. Essentially, an air-cooled engine could run in extremely hot temperatures, so in the deserts, and it could run in extremely cold temperatures. Unlike the sort of, well, not prehistoric, but the original sort of startings of what was water-cooled cars and everything that was developed within those sort of decades. And essentially, that was the sort of, and actually they had an advantage to that because the engines everything was relative, like a water pump is essentially same as the air-cooled system, and the driven fan. So essentially it didn't matter what it had. It had the right setup. It wouldn't burst the water hose. It was less maintenance. And actually they were pretty smart for doing it. Obviously it started as the people's car, and we won't really go into that because that's a bit of there's subjects within it that aren't of today's standards.
Attempt to avoid using the phrase Nazi wagon for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I'll try to. Yeah.
You bleeped it out.
So
you
mentioned
the war first, Sam. That's all I'm going to say.
He's going to demonetize us after 2 minutes.
I'm not. The advantage is, Matt, because we've not got 1,000 subscribers yet, we're not monetized, so it's
that's it. Yeah, you
have to have monetized in future.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a brilliant design, and as long as you do it right, essentially, too many people try and improve, or I say improve. Too many people try and remove aspects of the engine and go, oh, that'll be fine because it's a simple engine. Everyone thinks that's okay because there's less parts, so therefore a couple of less won't matter. But the reality is, if I told you to leave off a water hose off your car and start it up, you'd say, well, no, that's fucking stupid. And that's the same thing with an air-cooled engine. You leave off tinware that is aided to the cooling, and people go, oh, that's fine, that's just a bit of metal. But the reality is that suddenly becomes a knock-on effect. And I actually blew up an engine within the first year of me owning it because someone told me some information that was wrong. And I didn't know any different. I was like 18, 19 at the time. And I was just like, yeah, Beetle, go sideways whenever. And yeah, essentially driving down the road. And I'm like, that's a lot of smoke coming out the rear window. And then knock, knock, knock. And the big end was trying to be like a Jehovah's Witness on my door. So you know.
I didn't know Beetles could go sideways because we've got Amy's got a 71, so my girlfriend's got a 71.
Nice.
And the only thing I know about that is it's so low. Oh yeah, sorry Milton, fiance. With 2 E's, not one, for those who are questioning, given Bryn and Chris. You can just see him down there trying to work it out. It's 1 E when it's your male fiance, Bryn. It's 2 E's when they're female.
That's a
I think
thing.
one of them has an apostrophe on it as well.
Yeah, little
not an apostrophe, an
accent.
accent.
Yeah. There you
Only
go.
accents if they're from a different country.
See, so what we've done there is not only have we started educating you about air-cooled engines, we've taught you some English too.
The more you know. I mean, it's not English, but carry on.
So my only knowledge about that is it's too low for me to get in it and drive anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it has about that much ground clearance and is static.
It's the way it should be, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't go anywhere in it. So whenever we go to a VW show, I have to follow her.
Yeah.
Is that when you get in it, does it then go from that much ground clearance to that much ground clearance?
Yeah, actually, mate.
Yeah.
Because you are 2.2 Brins.
I will be honest. Like, so this week it's been a bit of a rough family week, COVID related stuff, and I am now no longer 2.2 Brins. I am now 2.3 Brins.
Jesus. So many Brins.
Been a long week.
It's been a hard week.
But
like so like my knowledge, like, and Amy has genuinely rebuilt more engines than me because she's rebuilt the Beetle engine a couple of times.
Nice.
And I tend to go to someone who's far more sensible and professional than me. Here is my engine.
Do something with it.
Make it do more power.
Yeah.
Not going knock, 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 knock.
So from what if I'm understanding this right from what you've just explained about the engine, is essentially it's one big heatsink.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong really to assume that. The easiest way to describe it is if you imagine the cylinders, where obviously it's a boxer. So if half of the cylinder, the top half, everything above it is hot, and then everything below it is the cold, per se. So essentially, the engine, if you were to look in the engine bay, has like a level tinware that runs around it, and like either a foam seal or a rubber seal or whatever. And the idea is that the top half is the only bit that's ever supposed to be hot, and then the bottom half is where all the cold air is and it comes out. So that's why something so simple as like the rubber seal, for example, that runs around that tinware. If you don't have that and you're sitting in traffic, suddenly all that hot air is coming back up into the engine bay, going into the fan and trying to cool cylinder heads and barrels that are already hot. So you're not charge cooling it as such. You're just keeping it warm. So that's why then you start getting pistons pinching up and all that kind of crap. So yeah, there's essentially hot and cold. And that is such a definitive thing. The amount of people I see drive around without certain tinware and either the seal or the loose fan belts, and then they wonder why either it's not charging and the engine's cooking itself. And you go, well, it's all part of it. But then the other side of it is people like that exist and actually make the company I work for money. So there is a good side to it. Naturally engines wear out, but then there are some people that unfortunately make mistakes and then they have to buy an engine. Well, the world goes round, doesn't it?
At least the engines are, like you say, reasonably simple and cheap. If you destroy a bit, it's not,
They're also extremely resilient. I know someone that threw a rod in France and managed to drive back with a hole in the crankcase, pouring oil into the top of it every now and then. Like they're monstrous things for actually to keep going. Like I've seen heads that are literally bouncing off, like like the studs have stretched too much. Like there's mad things that happen with them.
So is that where Volkswagen get their reputation for reliability from then? Just engines that don't quit?
It was probably the start. Yeah, because bearing in mind that the Beetle ran in Germany production anyway till like 79. So you've got probably... Go on, Matt.
Weren't they still producing the Beetle very recently in Brazil?
Mexico, yeah, up till 2003, I think. But actually, they were like a fuel injection version. So there was like a later
a brand
model.
new Beetle.
Yeah.
With no 3 plate on it. But...
Yeah, literally, it was very, very weird. But they were all made out of like leftover parts as well. And like you go, well, that's from an early car. Why is that on there? And then it was literally just whatever Germany had left over. They were like, here you go, have some of that. And then essentially they kind of just made it work. The fuel injection side of it's quite handy. But again, it's really primitive. It still runs like a standard distributor. It's single point throttle body. It's nothing fancy. But it is obviously, it has a little bit more drivability to it. But yeah, the engine itself, literally a 1600, if you were to buy a fuel injection one from us, maybe you need some sensor locations, but that's it. Essentially, the engine is literally the same. So they're so resilient and just sort of, they just go on. Like, and they're so, like the engine I built for my Beetle was a 1.9 litre. So it runs a standard crank, standard rods, but just larger bore. So essentially you just bore the heads out and bore the case out. But yet I've had that thing sideways on the limiter all the time. And I am not kind to that engine at all. And yet the other day I thought, you know what? I'm going to check if the head studs are like, if the heads have started to clap or whatever. They haven't. And I'm just like, this engine shouldn't be working. I've been so brutal to you and so harsh, but yeah, it carries on. And you hit the limit and you're like, yeah, well, that crank's going to snap at 5.5. So I hope it doesn't. And there's no counterweight on them. There is no counterweight on them whatsoever, Bryn.
Hang on, 5,500 RPM. Is that it?
Yeah. Oh, on the standard, yeah.
I think my diesel does more than that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Literally a standard crankshaft back. And again, you're talking about technology that started in the 40s, basically. And they kind of didn't really change it until, well, even the Type 4 engine, which is in like the 70s, and then the 80s, the water boxer one, which is what is in my van, is slightly different. But essentially, yeah, there was no like counterweight to them. So the crank essentially, as past 5.5, starts oscillating and can go. And so I set my limit. I think although the cam in it as well, because it's like a low end torque cam that I've got in the engine, I think it tops out at like 4.7 or something. So I've got like 300 RPM to be safe. But literally you're sitting there wheel spinning and the fucking lights going off and the limiter's bang, 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 bang. And you're like, please don't snap. That's all I'm thinking. Please don't snap.
So it's got to be weird, like being at a drift day in a Beetle. Right?
I wouldn't know. I haven't done it yet.
It's just Mexican roads, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I talk about, the thing is, I'm all mouth and no trousers at the moment. I've been developing this car for probably 4 years. And it's been, a lot of it was self-taught. And then I got the job at the VW Engine Company and I've learned a lot there, engineering-based and just general foundation of engine-based stuff. And then I've had this engine in bits for probably 5 years now, ready to be built. It's all the technology's kind of stayed the same. So luckily I haven't lost track with anything like that. But the 2276cc will go into it and it will be fuel injection. And that will be, because it will have a stroker crank, it will just be torque. So that'd be great. Again, there will be like no RPM to it, basically. The RPM will probably top out at like 6. But that doesn't matter as long as it's got the torque to it. Because don't forget, you've got a car that has a gearbox and an engine all sitting on the back wheels. Like all that weight, and you have to break traction from that. And that's quite harsh on everything.
So Sam, what I'm hearing is you spent a lot of time learning how to build this thing. So you haven't had much chance to learn about drifting. You sound like you need a racing driver.
Unfortunately, that's how I met Matt. Because I was, when did I first meet you, Matt? Was it Brands Hatch?
You've been con.
Yeah, it was your first day at Brands Hatch.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Well, that was, so that was with Pro Drift Academy. And that was, I had the half day or something.
Yeah, it was a half day.
Something like that, yeah. And then essentially, I learned from there. And that was, you guys taught me a lot. And then obviously I started working for you, didn't I? So, for Tom. And then everything COVID related is kind of put that on a pause. But yeah, unfortunately, Milton, I mean, unless you're doing it for free, and
He's genuinely looked away at it. He's just going, free?
I know he's just like, no.
No, not interested.
No.
If Matt does drive it, at least you've got experience of someone pushing the car off when it breaks.
That's it, yeah.
I don't want to be paid. I just want to drive something.
He is doing it for free.
See, where I say I'm all mouth and no trouser and I'm developing this car, the amount of people that have asked to have a go of it, and it's like, I want to build it to be able to say to people, I used to let everyone drive my car. Like, everyone was like, oh my God, can I have a go of your vehicle? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, you have, yeah. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. And now I'm spending thousands on it. I'm suddenly like, maybe not. And then you kind of just start picking who your favourites are and who you actually will allow to do it. But the reality is if it goes bang, like this engine that's in it at the moment, like I say, I'm harsh to it. And if it goes bang, I'll go, whoops, but that'll be it, right? I won't lose too much sleep over it. The new engine, however, has got so much invested in it. Like, and you guys probably don't know if we go into like value of aftermarket parts, like you can pick up BM engines, MX engines, all cheap. And you can go and buy a donor car or whatever for next to nothing because it's a rust bucket and just put the engine in and do X amount of drift days. If it blows up, oh, well, I'll just rebuild it. Volkswagens are so expensive, like aftermarket parts. And if I was to tell you that a 2.3 litre engine could cost you in parts alone $7,000, that's just parts. There's no one fitting in. That's no balancing or whatever.
That's nuts because that's more than I'd pay for a. I've seen for sale brand new rebuilt rotary engines, complete with bridge parts, like ready to go straight into the car for $5,500.
Yeah,
that kind of puts it into perspective.
I thought I had an expensive hobby bringing in parts from Japan, where most of it's like the shipping cost for me, right?
Yeah.
Because when offered the same solution that Bryn took for his engine as reground Piper cams, I went, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spend in excess of £1,000 shipping over some Tomies direct from Japan.
Oh.
And I don't like putting things on boats. That's my other problem. Just in case the container falls off the side.
Yeah. Honestly, people don't realise what goes... And that's part of the fun of doing what I'm doing, because obviously I'm not the first person ever to build a drift Beetle. Like, there are people that have drifted. A friend of mine is kind of the guy who got me into it, and he does it just for shits and giggles. He doesn't do any kind of competitions or whatever. He just does donuts when he wants to. But it was... I'm not the first to do it, and I will never claim to be the first to do it. But the point is, not many people have. And there is a reason for it. It's not easy. There is no like rule book or guide to building a drift Beetle. Like, yes, you can get the rough kind of foundations for what every drift car is built on. That's fair enough. But then you have to either make the parts or buy super expensive ones, because who the hell just sells drift Beetle parts? No one does. No one will. And that's the point of it. It's so, you look at something and you go, oh, well, that didn't work. Oh, well, that's 300 quid. All right, I'll just go and buy this instead and try it. And you're working with old technology as well. And that's what makes it fun, though. It's so challenging, a pain in the ass, and so annoying. But like, I know one day when it works, it will just be so sick to have it actually happen. And like you say, like your original question, Bam, like turning up at a drift day, I'll just be there for the fun of being there and being able to do it.
Yeah.
But you just know people are just going to be like, what? And that will be the satisfying thing of seeing people's faces as this Beetle drifts around.
I think that's a similar. Because I was going to say that's a similar face that we pulled when we saw a Suzuki Cappuccino drifting.
He did Formula G as well.
I tell you what, the thing that always gets me when I see it drifting, and I suspect probably I'll have similar feelings about seeing a Beetle drift, is when you see a Nissan Power going sideways, because it's just a cube on wheels, right? And you just don't expect it. Now I can completely get on board with that. Like the first time I turned around to anyone and was like, going to build an NA5 and I'm going to chase 230 brake in it. Like it's getting expensive. The next bit of engine work is $5,000 worth of parts,
Yeah.
and I could turbo it for a lot less.
Three. I think I spent 3.5, and that was drive in, drive out conversion with a light flywheel and a clutch. That was
And
drive in, drive out.
that included mapping as well, didn't it?
Mapping, ECU, downpipe, turbo, injectors, fitting it, mapping.
See, that's what I mean. You guys are so lucky. Like,
You should try buying rotary parts.
The problem I have is I now need to get to where I want to be. I now need a forged and balanced crank that'll allow me to get to 9,000 RPM.
Could do it.
What was that, Bryn?
I could do it. It's what I do, but it's going to cost you probably the same amount.
So like, the other advantage you've got running an air-cooled engine is you can do the same thing that you can do when you own a Saab and say that you own a fighter plane.
what?
Took me a second to work out where you were going with that.
We're in work talking today, and Matt turns around to me and goes, "Well, air-cooled engines work really well on like old single prop planes."
They had radiators and that, didn't they?
Not how that works.
That is how it was. Saabs are fighter planes, all of them. Sorry, Brent. Even the diesels are fighter planes.
Imagine a diesel fighter jet.
I feel like this is going to break Bryn, probably.
Yeah,
maybe, definitely.
Yeah,
50% of the mission every episode is to break Brent.
Or piss Matt off so he leaves.
Yeah.
It's just this constant internal conflict of like, I know he's wrong and I could argue against this, but he's not going to admit he's wrong, so it's pointless. And so I'm sat here in the middle.
Let's hear the argument. Go on, Brent. Let's go.
Because the air cools the engine does not make it the same as a winged mass destruction aircraft.
All right, so what Bryn's pointed out to me there is the fact that if I want to make a Beetle a fighter jet, I need to put wings on it.
Wings.
Well, also, it can't then be called a jet.
All right, if I want to make a Beetle a fighter plane, terribly sorry, if we're going to argue semantics here, I've just got to put wings on it. That's where we're at.
Well, if you put wings on it, they're called a. There is actually a plane that uses Beetle engines. I can't remember what they're called, but there was a. I remember because I used to do flying as well. In all seriousness, I used to do I still do model flying, and they used to have these planes like as part of the show, and they were so slow that I think they were called the Dawn Patrol, but everyone used to call them the Yawn Patrol, and they were literally like you could have walked quicker than this aircraft. Like
they still flew.
Yeah, like they just poodle along with little Volkswagens up the front. You're like, what? But yeah, it is actually a thing. People have made twin versions.
So more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we have a moment where the mad scientist has been right and the engineer has been wrong.
And now he is losing his nut.
He is losing his nut because I've said a Beetle.
I think he's Googling right now. Yeah, like
I'm having a look for the VW plane and it's fucking sick, but also this exists.
Yes, yeah, a radio engine. Yeah.
So is that a plane
one of them
engine?
on my elbows.
Yeah, that's the other way around. That's a
Plane engine in a Beetle.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is also acceptable. I think we'll allow that.
Still not a fighter plane.
I mean, the markings on it said it was.
Doesn't have any fucking machine guns, though, does it?
Could be a kamikaze.
So what you're saying, Bryn, is if we put a radial engine in a Beetle and some machine guns on it, then I can claim it's a fighter plane.
You may as well put some swastikas on it while you're at it. Like what?
That'll go down well.
Demonetized.
Nope, that's staying in.
Also, a Beetle with wings would be a really unstable plane because that's very, very, very short for a plane.
Yeah. That
Just
moment
put a long
arm
tail on
is
it,
cool.
Bryn. There you go.
It's not.
That's fine. I'm fully willing to watch Bam try and dogfight in his VW Beetle.
I'm in.
I'll chase you down. Yeah.
Tell you what, Bam, we'll get you a Beetle with a radial engine and wings, and we'll get one of those shit VW Beetle and Beetle engine planes, and we'll see which one of you lasts longest in the fight.
So what, for everybody who's just heard Bryn's mic crackle, what he said is, we can have a dogfight in Beetles.
What are you doing?
It was such a delay then. It was like a bad Chinese dubbed film. It's like, I will fight you.
Why are you sad?
Also, I like how it managed to pick up Bryn's voice when he went to like an octane of 10. You know.
Yeah, the dog whistle pitch.
Yeah.
Don't know what you're talking about.
It's the madness.
You guys, man, just going back to your point about radio engines, you guys have got it easy in terms of platforms and engine money. Like, it is actually, you guys you're like weep about the fact that, oh, it cost me this much, but then you've never just built a standard engine that goes in a Volkswagen. Like, that's just depressing.
So actually, I very nearly had to. Because Amy, until she started going out with me and I fixed her and she started buying Jap cars very, very recently, also had a Mark III Scirocco.
Oh, Mark 1 and 2 are better, but yeah.
1.4 TSI.
Yeah.
With the stretchy timing chain that didn't last the service interval.
Oh.
So,
they're meant to be not stretchy.
What I actually did with that was a name that's familiar to at least 3 of the others on this call is dump it outside Van Beek's and message Tom saying, timing train's stretched on Amy's Scirocco, need someone to fix it. He replied with nope, and I sent a photo of it saying too late. And that's because I'm not rebuilding a Beetle engine, a Scirocco engine. No, never.
Yeah,
it'd probably be easier if you put the Beetle engine in it.
I think maybe we should have done.
I have a question about Beetle engines. What kind of power are you running?
What, in my modified engine or the standard?
The modified.
Either or. Because you're only getting to like idle speed or something or whatever.
yeah, literally, I'm just beyond idle. A standard engine and hold on to your socks is about 44 horsepower out the factory, right? Which is like blistering power, by the way.
Is horsepower not kilowatts or anything like that?
Horsepower, no. I'm not sure if it's llama power either, but
is that the 1.1 or whatever they are?
Oh no, that's the 1.6. That's like the largest out of like Type 1 Beetle engines is about 40. I think they maybe got 50 when they were like fuel injection, maybe a smidge more, but that's about it basically. And then my 1914 that I have currently, bearing in mind it's made out of all second-hand parts that I had built years and years ago from an engine, that was 120 at the flywheel, so 95 at the wheels.
So a stock MX-5.
I'm just going to
basically.
Maths.
How much do they weigh though?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Yeah, 1,100. Maybe less.
I'll have a look.
They don't weigh a lot. The main issue.
1,100. An MX-5 is like 9. Mine's 908, I think, or 920 or something.
I think stock MX-5s are about 980, give or take, depending on the spec.
Oh, here we go. Bryn's
found a fact.
I've done some maths. Okay.
Yeah.
It's widely known that one of the best horsepower per litre outputs from an NA engine on the market was the Honda S2000, which makes 118 horsepower per litre. The VW Beetle, on the other hand, makes 27.5 horsepower per litre. That is, so let's just 118 divided by 27. Oh, I've done this wrong.
Bryn, really important thing. You've not got your science glasses on yet, mate.
I don't know where they are.
This is maths with Bryn. This is something completely different.
How does the internet work?
Looking at the Type 1, they're 800 to 840. So 120 horsepower in 840 kilos is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but imagine if it was fitted with a real engine.
One that didn't go
Ooh.
tap, 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 tap. Yeah.
It makes 4.4 times less power per litre.
Yes.
Hang on. Speaking of, I did see someone put a VW Beetle shell on an MX-5 chassis.
Yes.
Yeah,
And that
I've
looks-
seen that.
From
Yeah.
my understanding there, Milton, a far easier thing to do is to shove a Subaru Boxer engine in a Beetle.
No.
I've offended him.
No. Oh, I'll tell you what, I'm going to turn into Bryn.
That's what I wanted to do as a kid. I
No.
really wanted a Beetle as a kid, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to get one. I'm going to put a Subaru Boxer.
No, you're going to trigger me.
Funny
Stop.
exhaust.
Keep going, Brent.
No.
Broken him.
It's where do I even
Make it front wheel
start?
drive.
Right. I love the engines, right? There's nothing wrong with the Subaru or its engine or anything to do with that. What is wrong with it is the illusion people have behind them. They go, oh, well, what I'm going to do is spend this much money on a conversion. I'm going to buy a second-hand Subaru engine that's been ragged around by a 17-year-old and expect it to have more horsepower.
No, Sam.
And it just
Subaru drivers
doesn't.
treat their engines with respect.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. They're like old women that go to church on Sundays, aren't they?
Yeah,
Right.
they're all middle-aged men who like to swap their wives.
There are
Oh.
only two kinds of Subaru driver. There are the Chav Razzers and there are the 50-year-old men. And my friend
yeah.
Will, who is a 50-year-old man.
So, Bryn, you're the engineer and you're smarter than me. So ask me a question you want to know
Oh, I've
about
got a few.
air-cooled engines. Go on.
I've got a couple of things that I've often wondered. So,
Why?
why?
Just why?
As we've already kind of said, it's sort of the same as water cooling in a way. You're still just using another fluid to cool the metal. The thing that always made me nervous is water is kind of a bit easier to control how much heat you're taking out because it's always directly you don't have to worry quite so much about the routing. But presumably it's the same principle applies. You just got to make sure that cooling fluid gets to the appropriate places. It just so happens that cooling fluid is air. But temperatures, right? You're driving around in your car, on your water gauge, you're looking at 95, 100. Okay, she's getting a bit toasty. Now, presumably you still have a temperature gauge, but it's in the metal? No temperature gauge.
Bryn, as the guy who did chemical engineering here, air does not behave like a fluid. I spent a large portion of my life learning that.
In answer to your question, Britt, it's sort of, well, essentially, just so you know, they do have thermostats of sorts, and it's essentially like if you imagine a Chinese lantern that is connected that goes through the two barrels, in between two barrels and a cylinder head, and then it connects to flaps on the fan shroud. So obviously, as the fan is blowing air, they'll be shut when the engine's cold, so the actual barrels and the pistons and everything warms up quicker. And then as the air coming through, because it will get some through, it warms up that thermostat. It slowly, the concertina opens, and then the flaps actually open and direct cold air and will charge the sort of fins, like the heat sink, as Matt was talking about. And the temperature gauge you have is the oil pressure light when it starts flickering, because that means you've got like 3 psi, and that's sort of that's when you're cooking one, because that's why they're built with like stupid amount of tolerances. You've got, bearing clearances is like, I don't know, it's like 1,000 and you could probably go more if you wanted to, and yet you're running 2050 oil like maple syrup, but yet the engine can run to 120 degrees plus. Like really, and without getting too kind of who's cooked one? I don't know.
How'd you know that? You said you don't have a temperature gauge.
Oh, no, I have a temperature gauge. But a standard Beetle doesn't, is what I mean. Yeah. Like so everyone else literally has a charge light, which means either your fan belt's broke or your alternator brushes have gone, or your dynamo, and you've got an oil pressure light. They're the two things you have. Oh, and a fuel gauge, because that's convenient. But
that's fair. That makes sense.
So that is the only indication you have. And generally, you don't get a problem. But I had when I set up my timing wrong once, and this is totally my fault, I bought an MSD ignition that was digitally programmable. And I put the curve in, I'm going to sound so stupid, upside down. Because I read the chart wrong. So I had like 20 or 32 degrees at idle and like 7.5 at obviously 3,200 RPM kind of thing. And my engine went on to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and I was like, that's dead. And yeah, I just switched it off. I just left it, came back to it and turned it over and it turned over. I was like, yep, that's fine. Right. Okay. I'll run that another day. And literally it's run fine ever since. And I am amazed I didn't burn a hole in it or something. Like it's, I don't know how it still worked, but they're just so resilient in what they do. But yeah, the air is, you can only govern it so much because it will kind of creep through. And I suppose certain thermostats on water-cooled cars, obviously they kind of charge as well though, don't they? They open and then close and open and close until obviously they get way too hot. But yeah, you'll cook one of the flat four water boxer engines at 120 degrees. You would probably blow a head ring or burst one of the sort of rubbers that goes around the jacket and the cylinder heads. Yeah, an air-cooled engine is sort of like, oh, that's a bit uncomfortable. But then you switch it off or idle it for ages, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm all right now. And they just sort them. They are designed to run hotter because they do run hotter. It's just the nature of them. So they are, everything kind of in theory wears out quicker because you have such high tolerances and such variables that can have movement, but it means they can get loads of punishment and survive. So it's kind of like a weird sort of toss up between which one's better, like X amount of miles or put it through hell and it still works. I don't know. Like, and the reality is normally people have sold the car before they blow the engine up. So
in a way, right? Not having water it's an odd one to think about because when somebody kills an engine, when you actually kill an engine in a normal car, one of two things happens. You throw a rod, get knock, or you blow a head gasket. The only reason that blowing a head gasket is really a problem is because water and oil start to mix. If you don't have one of those two things, that problem goes away. No. And now I can't work out whether the problem goes away and therefore the engine's more resilient or whether you should have had water and the engine would have been more resilient.
I would say you make a very valid point. And don't get me wrong, there is a reason water-cooled cars are only made now. There is a reason for that. They are superior and they have so much more adaptability and obviously modern technology helps. But for just general resilience of an old technology, and that's I think you have to bear that in mind is the age of the technology. The engine didn't really change from 1938. Like it did, but not really, because it still sort of stayed the same. Yeah. So essentially, that in itself, you kind of have to judge it off of that. And obviously, a Mark I Golf came out in 1974, same year my Beetle was made, and yet you had a water-cooled car and an air-cooled car. And I could probably guarantee that of that time, the air-cooled car, even with it, if it had problems, would outlast the water-cooled one, because suddenly, like you say, you blow something, you're like, oh, I'm stuck. Whereas an air-cooled car, if you start having the cylinder head lifting, or you even throw a rod, you could still drive it, and you could still get to where you were going. You might do some little bit of damage in between, but yeah, you would still get there. And it's kind of, I don't know. It is a very difficult one to answer, but they are, for what they are and the less maintenance factor, they're just brilliant that way. And there's just less parts. And I'll tell you a stupid story that I did. So I started model flying when I was 13, which is all air-cooled engines because naturally they're propeller-driven and they just have heat sinks around them like RC cars do. And then I got my first car, which was my Beetle, back when I was 17 or 18? 17. And I went from a Toyota Yaris as my learning car to that. And I drove that for like 4 years or 3 years. I then bought the GTI Lupo. I was sitting in traffic one day and it was just stop traffic. And the temperature gauge went to, it was like 130 or something stupid. And I didn't notice because I was like just sitting there like that. And I thought, oh no, and steam started coming out of the bonnet. opened the bonnet, and the header tank was overflowing. I was like, do you know what? I'll open that, and then it will stop overflowing. And that was the day that I injured myself and ended up in hospital because of water. And like that was a lesson in itself. Like, because I'd never even thought about the pressure and everything that was dealt with that. Bearing in mind, I wasn't really researching engines at the time either. So I'm hands-on, but I wasn't clued up at all. And I'll happily admit to that. But that day, I made a massive mistake that taught me just how simple air-cooled engines are. And you just take it for granted, like, by so much.
So you were like, fuck this water shit. Straight back to air.
Oh, I think I had that car amazingly for like a year or two. And then it was just an expensive car that I kind of couldn't really be bothered to have anymore. But there is a scar that runs down my arm, and in certain like lights you can see it and stuff. But yeah, it was that day. And when I bought the van as well, I rebuilt the engine on that, and obviously I build them at work. That's fine. Installed it. First time I'd installed a water boxer engine for like 2 years at work, and I was just looking at this like, why did I do this to myself? Like, air-cooled engines are so easy because you just throw them in. You just do whatever the hell you want to them. They generally work. Like, yes, you get them to go wrong. Like, don't get me wrong, but honestly, like they are so satisfyingly easy. But you still have to know what you're doing.
What we're actually saying here essentially is, when I finally somehow lay my hands on a 1971 911, don't change the engine.
No.
God, no.
I'm just loving this idea that literally you ask this guy, so why are you into air-cooled engines? And deep down, the reason is water scary, water bad, water hurt me.
Water hot. Water very hot. There is a fluid that cools these engines, and it is oil.
Oh, yeah, well.
But it's done in a smart way, because the oil is designed, if you know, obviously, as it's a boxer, it's a pushrod engine. So you have these tubes that sit underneath the barrels, which naturally, as the air comes through, it will cool them as well. Well, they get pushed up the pushrods, obviously, and lube up the rocker gear like any other engine would. But then as it runs back down and it's hot from the cylinder head, that air is charging on the pushrod tubes. So it cools the oil as well. And then it goes back into the sump and it goes sort of back round. You have an oil cooler, but there is so many elements of that.
Living a lie.
Yeah, it is technically cooled by fluid as well.
Yeah, well, most engines are cooled by water and oil, I suppose.
Yeah, they will have, yeah.
I didn't realise that they actually had thermostatically controlled air valves, which again makes sense, because otherwise how the hell do you control what temperature is? But so does anybody actually measure the metal temperatures in the heads, in the barrels, or is that not really a thing?
No, not if you're running only if you're running performance.
Okay.
And even then, essentially, they're kind of, if you get the foundations right, you don't really mess up. And the sort of the head temp, I'll say this loosely, doesn't matter as such, as long as it's not cooking territory.
Yeah,
it will run at whatever it will run at, and that's kind of the sort of method behind the madness. And essentially, they're always getting air, whether it's idle or, like, you know, Milton says, just above idle. And so, yeah, it's kind of, it's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, they do have thermostats. A lot of people remove them because they don't think, again, they need them. And they still work. Don't get me wrong, they still work. But
people with water-cooled cars remove their thermostats thinking they're a good idea. They're not. Stop doing it.
Yes, exactly. But again, it's the same sort of concept. Piston aluminium swells up quicker than a cast iron barrel does, and that's just the nature of it.
There's a little bit of my brain now, just going. The mad scientist part of my brain is kicking in here, brain, right? Which is always dangerous. But could you get the heat exchange right? Could you get the heat exchanger out of a fridge or a freezer and just cool the air down around the top just a bit?
Well, that was one of my questions, because obviously in a water-cooled engine, if you need more cooling, you just fit a massive radiator. How do you go about cooling more? Like, how do you get more air into it without going faster? Obviously.
You can change the obviously the crank pulley to run a bigger diameter, and therefore it drives further, the belt further, and you can run a smaller alternator pulley. So essentially, it will speed up the whole assembly, the rotating assembly as such for the fan. But then a lot of the time, again, because the air kind of never, that variable kind of never really changes too much. And unless you're running like turbo and crazy compression and all of that kind of thing, you don't really need to worry too much about the air over the heads. And actually, it's more the oil that you have to worry about, because the oil goes very, very thin. And that's where the element happens. I mean, you could potentially try and charge more air, which would potentially cool more of the oil, but the oil coolers are kind of limited, and there's all that element. So actually a lot of people tend to run, and this is a fun fact for you as well, Bryn, they don't run filters. They run a strainer, which is like a sieve for stopping small rocks. So a lot of people who run performance run an outlet pump that essentially then goes through a filter. You would then have either a cooler or two that will potentially have a fan that's thermostatically controlled, and then back into the engine, and then obviously it cycles round.
So they have a separate cooling circuit for the oil?
Not standard, but aftermarket, Yeah, you'd literally have pipes running off like you would run an oil cooler on the front of your bumper kind of thing. Yeah. It's that aspect. But obviously, again, everything's at the back. Pump. No, it just runs off of the standard, but then you can get bigger gears. So you run a larger volume pump, and then essentially, it doesn't change your pressure as such. It just, because that's controlled with valves and bits and pieces in the engine. But the actual volume, naturally it shoves it round.
So it is still the standard pump. It's not a separate pump.
No, you can, again, stage, like all those sort of stage pumps that then run bypasses and all that kind of stuff. You can run that, but then you're running an extra belt, and then you're talking like dry sump territory. And obviously you're then talking high horsepower and all that kind of stuff. So, But it is, that's something I might have to do for drifting, because a flat four engine, if you imagine, the sump is only probably that deep in terms of what oil it holds. It holds about 2.5 litres by standard. We then run deep sumps, but again, you then have to consider ground clearance. But you actually get a lot of surge, because just above that sort of level of sump, imagine here is a pushrod tube. So when you go sideways, all the oil goes straight up into the cylinder head, and then you get oil starvation. And that happened back when I was doing a load of testing with one of my engines. I was driving about, and if I did a sort of high G fast corner, not drifting, literally just a fast corner, all of a sudden, bing, oil light would come on. And that would mean I was at like 4,000 RPM at 3 PSI. And that's like breaking things territory, as you know. So it was like, right, switch off. And that happened about 4 times before I found a kind of remedy for it all, and sort of combination of parts. But that was a bit scary.
Will you be glad to know that for drifting, forces are actually quite a bit less than grip driving? Yeah, naturally. Fall sideways, thankfully.
But it is, I suppose, the only time it would really ever cause a problem is a sweeping long corner you were trying to sort of drift, which would obviously then be high G. Or the only other thing to consider is transitions, especially high angle. Because then you're literally you're just throwing it all about, aren't you? And inline engines have a sump that's nice and narrow, kind of, and you got all that kind of compaction. Literally right at the bottom and all in that little area. But not Volkswagens. No. Another thing that makes it challenging but fun, even if you do break something.
So Milton,
yes.
When are we putting? Oh, I've just knocked everything on my desk there. When are we putting you in an air-cooled drift car?
Really fast, because I'm only like one Bryn. Wait.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for reminding me.
I don't know. I think that'd be pretty good at Formula G.
Yeah?
They don't weigh a lot.
No, but all the traction's over the back end, so you get...
That's what you want.
You get pendulum effect. So literally,
driver can
Actually, it's not a stupid idea to make a Formula G car out of a Beetle, because you could just convert it into a beach buggy and it'd be even lighter.
yeah.
That's what I distinctly remember going to town with my mom at one point when I was I don't know, probably like 10 or 11 or something, and a Baja bug style thing came past in the other lane. Obviously not like proper open wheel wide like they are in America, but as close as I guess you could legally get here, with the fucking exhaust that comes out the
stinger,
boot, and the deck lid open. And I just remember looking at this thing, it's like, that is the coolest fucking car I've ever seen in my life, because they're
real
so
world
different.
Hot Wheels.
So they are literally like a Hot Wheels.
Yeah, no, they are. I've got a couple of friends building them at the moment, and they're proper like 80s colour schemes as well. They're nuts.
You can't build Baja and not have it metal flake. Like, you just.
Yeah, it depends if you're doing rattle cans though, doesn't it?
It doesn't suit like a modern muted colour scheme, right? You can't go,
No.
Here is this 80s body, and I'm gonna be tame with it.
But like, I don't know, all like the pastel colours and the like. That's made a revival, and whenever I see like a modern car in those pastel tones, I'm just like, you're just trying to be a 60s Beetle. So I disagree with you, and I think they should be in those colours.
I mean, if you want to go with that, you look at the Fit 500.
Yeah, that is
They're the ones bringing all the colour back.
They're the ones that just bring home all the gingerbread coffee, Matt.
Well, they're the ones the original 500 had an air-cooled engine in it.
Yeah.
Well, that was
But it was also a Fiat, so the chances are its gearbox was made of cheese.
That too.
I have a Beetle thing.
Okay.
Go on, Melon.
Have you seen there's a TV program called Street Outlaws?
Yeah.
And there's a guy in there that's got a Beetle that he drag races and fishes with, as he calls it.
Yeah.
And I looked it up. He's got a T3/T4 turbo engine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
so is that
they call it the dung beetle, don't they?
The dung beetle. 1,000 horsepower. Fuck off.
Is that
Yeah.
Just put it in Google. I doubt it's air-cooled.
It probably is, but it's probably just like one run and shut down kind of thing.
Yeah, it's drag racing, street stuff, isn't it? So.
Yeah, because my friend who I crew for at the pod, his Beetle is it's a steel pan, like all original kind of body, no fiberglass on it. Obviously, there's some aluminium bits here and there, but that's at the moment on its mild tune, over 550 horsepower, running a 78mm turbo, fuel injection, no NOS, just literally a massive dustbin for this turbine, and a 2.5 litre?
Cool as fuck.
2.7. But yeah, literally the whole engine just hangs out the back. It's mad.
That is cool as fuck.
And yeah, we and then we had valve float on it last season. That wasn't pretty, but yeah, that was. Yeah, he broke a rocker arm because I think the inlet? Yeah, the inlet broke or the push rod shattered or something. And then there was so much boost in the engine, the exhaust valve tried opening and it just like snapped the arm completely and just absolutely ruined the rocker arm because it was just trying to fight all that boost in the cylinder. So yeah, that was fun. But yeah. Sorry, Milton. Was there? Did you want to know something about that, or are you just airing it?
I knew of a Beetle that was fast. That's the only one I know of.
That Beetle was. I'd say that was one of the Beetles that got recognition through social media because it was in association with that. Is it AZN?
Asian, yeah. AZN.
Yeah. And, I just looked up. I had their website up. It didn't specify what the engine was.
Yeah, They were sort of the ones that got public recognition for like drag racing Beetles. Like people in Volkswagen knows it exists, but obviously anyone outside of that, if you said, "Oh yeah, I drag race a Beetle," they'd be like, "What?" and they'd be all mad about it. But yeah, that car did kind of set a good social standard to show that, like, don't mess with the little guy kind of thing. But obviously, they have a lot of investment in that, because that not only does it runs like a holly carb, I think, doesn't it? And then like a draw
Yeah, I
through.
think that's what it said.
650 CFM Holly carburetor and
Yeah.
a Rancho 4-speed transmission, apparently.
Yeah, I was at Ultimate Dubs and there was some bonkers drag Beetles there. That's just, you can do what Bryn's grinning and it's making me nervous. It's like he's about to cause trouble.
No, I just love it.
I think it's the same as, like, you go and look at the MX5 community, for example, and there are like 1,000 horsepower MX5 out there, but generally, like you say, outside of the scene or the community that you're in, the general public don't see that.
I think the real question is it cheaper to get to 1,000 breaking an MX5 or in a Beetle?
No,
Easy in MX5.
Yeah, MX5. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely.
So the answer, just for the importance of the series, the answer is still Miata.
The answer is MX5.
I wanted one. I won't deny. I was going to buy one a few years back, especially after like Matt and I, obviously with Pro Drifter and everything. It was kind of like that'd be a cool car to sort of have as a daily. But then you realise it's so small, and as a spare car, it's kind of useless as such. It's 4 wheels and an engine. Don't get me wrong; it'd get you somewhere, but it's useless beyond that.
I disagree with that.
God.
I moved a single bed with my MX5.
Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I've got the Spike, which does everything except go fast. I've got the Stagia, which can do literally everything, including going fast. And I still find myself just wanting to go, I want to go out on my MX5.
Yeah, there is something about them. They are. I know a lot of people slate them, and there's a community of jokes that go with them. But the reality is, people still like them. Even the people that joke about them still like them. Like we've all owned or still own one, but we still make jokes about them. Yeah, that's it. It's something that obviously there's this big issue with the car community anyway. People shit on other people just for the sake of it. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're not a dick, do whatever the hell you want and enjoy it. And if that means you want to pummel all your money into a 2-seater sports car that weighs as much as a fag paper, but yet it drifts and is just one of the most fun little things to go around in, do it. Like that's just why not? And I think people will slate Volkswagen owners for the amount of money they put into these cars. Like, I have spent, shame to say it, over a year's wages overall on owning my car, and yet all of your cars would probably beat it still, happily. And yet that's how much I've...
Maybe not his, or his, because...
Mine's getting a full BDC build on it, so...
Which car am I allowed to bring? The first question is, which car am I allowed to bring? Because if you limit me to my Spike, you'll probably beat it.
But at the end of the day, no matter what car he brings, or me, it's not as cool as a fucking Beetle, is it?
Yeah.
It does depend. Go on.
I think Sam has just hit on a point, right? Like, and I may be about to get a little bit car scene political here, but I miss like when and I think I've got this advantage being a bit older than everybody else.
Bit older.
I miss the Max Power days, which was all about doing whatever the hell you wanted, and everybody was into, like, you've done your own thing, that's cool.
Yeah.
I miss that. There is far too much capability on social media to sit behind a keyboard and not get punched for what you say.
But I think social media is part of the problem. Is somebody did something new for the first time, and somebody went, that's cool, I'm going to do that. And then now 2 people have done it, which means more people are seeing it, so more people are copying it.
Yeah.
To a point where everybody just does the same thing.
And that's boring. Like, I think building a bonkers drift Beetle actually makes me want to build a bonkers drift Beetle, if I'm honest. Like,
Oh,
I
we
would
know
much
where you
rather.
could get
I'll be
Beetle.
honest. I would much rather go out drifting in Sam's Beetle. That way.
I'm here.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't make the normal reference this year because it's not going to be a year of that. Yeah. Also, this was on offer this week. But like, I think I'm kind of into the concept of learning about drifting in a car that you don't think about drifting.
Yeah.
And these guys all know I drive grip all the time. Like, it's my thing. I don't get going sideways. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not the fastest way through a corner.
Well, it's not. It's just the funnest way through a corner.
Yeah.
I've gone round Santa Pod faster drifting than I had trying to grip before.
But is that on a car that's set up to drift?
Yeah.
You've gone round Santa Pod faster.
So
He means the drift circuit, not the drag strip. I know where you're going with that. The word round.
I think Mythbusters did a drift myths, so to speak, a couple of years ago, and I don't think you can take too much away from it, but they did overlays on tight gravel circuits versus like long sweeping ones, and
I remember
compared
that.
drifting them to not drifting them. And the tight sort of hairpin turns, it's fast to slide them, but the long sweepers grip drive.
Well, that's
So when you get down to the it's rallying basically. But when you get down to the chicane at Silverstone next, drift it. It's faster. Don't think Silverstone will enjoy it, but it's faster.
No.
The last time, to be fair, the last time I was out in Silverstone, they didn't like it when I tried to go over 5 miles an hour. So
That was Lapland though. So
but we digress.
yeah,
Because
just a little.
because it's not air cooled. I
Could be,
mean,
could be.
the elf was air cooled. He was stood out in the cold.
Yeah.
I just like because the only car I've ever been interested in that's air cooled is the 1971 911, and that's just because I think it is potentially one of the most beautiful cars ever made. I just think it's like if you think about a 911, that's the shape that comes into your brain. And I know they've not changed it a lot, but they've changed it enough.
Yeah, it's the one that you most associate with. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the latest 2 generations apart, but you could tell. Yeah, that one. Yeah,
exactly.
I know what you're saying. Yeah,
And
but see, Porsche even they were air cooled up to like 90. It was like 92.
You looked it up earlier. It was wasn't it as late as 98?
Or 90. Jesus, even later than I thought. Yeah, but the turbos they were running intercoolers that are on the back deck lid that were like that fucking fat and like that thick, and yet they were still air cooled running turbochargers, and you're just like, this is nuts. But it proved that it does work. Like they are very, very clever, and don't get me wrong, they have some sort of trick stuff inside the engine that helps with the whole air cooled kind of remedies and issues and everything that goes on with them. But yeah, they are Porsche sort of proved that you could still do it, but naturally water cooled in modern technology is always going to triumph. It just naturally will. But ultimately I think what I want to do out of all of this is there are loads of people that do grip racing on Beetles because there's certain cup series. I know they run water cooled and stuff, but even in air cooled, there's loads of people that drag race because drag race is just loads of horsepower, roughly strong gearbox, and you can just go. And I get that. People get excitement from it. I'll never shit on people for whatever they want to do. But drifting, it's just not meant to do it. And it is going to be such a challenge. And I'll probably do something so stupid one day, and I know I'll kick myself for it. But it's just something to be, and I don't even want to go into competitions with it, by the way. It won't go into competitions because I'd have to chop it up so much, and I don't want to do that with my first car. I want to keep this thing. I don't want to turn it into just some bit of tin. But at the same time, my aim is for demos, drift demos and kind of doing fun social media projects like videos and marketing and bits and pieces like that. Fun things that don't associate with just having to always be at a set place and get X amount of points. And you guys, right? I did a bit of drifting and I still can and whatever, but you guys know it tenfold over me in terms of everything that goes into it and the points and what you have to adhere to and all the regulations and that. And I just want to drift my car, man. That's what I want to do. And I think it's something so, how to sort of word it. It's cool to just try it, and I want other people to enjoy it. It's not just about me wanting to drift my car, because if I just wanted to drift a car, I'd go and buy an MX-5. In all seriousness, I wouldn't dick about. I'd just go and get an E36 or an MX-5, because why wouldn't you if that's all you want to do? But that's not all I want to do. I want to do something silly that will cost me a shitload of money. I'll still be living at home with my parents and crying about it, but I'll have a cool car. And that's kind of, but I want other people to appreciate. And I love.
And like Jimmy Broadbent now.
Who?
He's a YouTuber. He lives in a shed, but he's got an R32, an R35 GTR.
That's me, the poorer.
And a Turbo MX-5.
Oh, no. But yeah, it's for other. I do want other people to enjoy it as well. And I'd love the idea of one day running, depending on events and all that kind of stuff, and whether you're allowed to. But I'd love to run a drift taxi with it, because I just think it would be so cool to give people the opportunity to look at that and go, oh man, I really want to go out in that. And just
I can tell you the answer to that one. You'd be allowed to. You're allowed, because I do drift taxiing at Pod.
Fair enough.
And you'll have that. The other thing you have is like you'll have that brilliant moment that was way more brilliant for Milton. Like just the tone of Milton's voice the day I told him that one of our competition winners had gone out and bought an MX-5 to learn to drift after they'd been out in the car with him. Like, that was it.
Fun.
And some bonkers human being is going to go out with you in your Beetle, right? And they're going to go, I want to go sideways in a Beetle. And it's going to do that thing in their brain. It's going to go, they're going to go, yeah. I mean, they're just going to be an excitable little kid about it.
The problem is I'm not going to be able to tell him how to do it, because I don't even know. I'm just going to be like, well, this kind of works. Like there is, and that's the thing. It's like,
and that's the great thing about playing with stuff that's not meant to do the thing you're trying to do with it. Like the hijet, the hijet build I did was probably going to be the only thing I'd ever thought about drifting until I realised that, quite frankly, Donkey Kong driving a Japanese K-truck. Right, which is what it was, right? For Bryn saw me drive it, and Matt saw me drive it, and it was like around the steering wheel. There was no way, like I could not have drifted that car, could I? In truth,
no.
Milton probably could have, because it's rear wheel drive and mid engine. It's basically a Porsche, but there's no way I could have done it because I'm a fat lump.
You're not fat, you're just fluffy.
I'm just 2.3 Brins. We're trying to, by the way, Sam, we are trying to establish Bryn as a unit of measurement.
Yeah, I think we should. Hang on. Mullet included though.
How much boost is a Bryn?
I'm gonna do the conversion and find out how much a Beetle weighs in Brins.
There we go.
Later.
Bryn, how many Queen's English kilos do you weigh? Or stones? And
Last time I weighed myself, I was 9 stone, I think.
What are you in, Bryn? What are you in, Bryn,
So,
Sam?
One Beetle on its lowest weight, according to Wikipedia, is 14 Brins.
At least I'm lighter than a Beetle.
I think I weigh 10 or 11 stone. How tall are you, Bryn? Because I've heard you called a leprechaun, so how tall are you?
I'm actually not even that short. I'm just really small. So I'm like 5.
How tall are you?
Or 5'7".
Yeah, see, I'm probably only a bit taller than you.
The thing is, it's all in proportion. So I have a really
Yeah.
small head and a really small body. So I look like a normal sized person that's
Just-
really
Far away. Yeah.
He does, but he does.
Yeah.
He does also have a pot of gold that lives at the end of at the end
That's
of the
it.
rainbow.
Literally, everyone's like, "Oh, Bryn's ages away," and you're like, "Hey guys," and you're just next to us. Yeah.
really good for spying on people.
That's it. Yeah. No, and Milton? Did you say you're 5'5"?
No, I'm 5'8", I think. I haven't
Well,
taken.
to be fair, the three of us are about the same height.
Yeah,
Which makes
I'm
them all
about
short.
5'8", 5'7", something like that. But then all my mates are like almost 6 foot, so I get called the short ass, even though I'm averagely height. And yeah, I'll be at a car show and I go, look, there's a small man, and they're like, no, you're still small, and I just can't get out of it. Like it's
Yeah.
So I think actually this is probably, we've discovered this week the answer is still MX5.
Oh,
But if you want to be absolutely bonkers, right, go and drift a Beetle.
Yeah, if you want to spend a lot of money and time,
And if you want to motivate Sam to finish his Beetle quickly, go and build a drift Beetle and film videos of it so we can see Sam get it done quicker than you.
don't follow him.
or that, yeah. Well,
On
He's
what?
that way. He's that way, Bryn.
That way.
I'm
Don't
here.
follow him.
wherever I
He
am,
can-
I'm here.
Is now the point he plugs his own Instagram?
He can plug his own Instagram. We've all plugged our own Instagrams.
Well, the point is my normal name just doesn't really have any kind of, whereas that does, and the name, that side name does.
Under him. Put it under him now. Put his
Okay.
fucking Instagram there.
All right,
Go
it's
and
appearing.
Yeah.
It's
Just put my
appearing
face on your
right
face.
now.
There. With an explosion.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
No, the
Milton,
thing is, you guys
Milton, I'm
like,
going to tell you right now, what will appear there will not be an explosion.
As long
it'll be
as
an
something
explosion of
appears
something.
right here, there.
Or maybe it'll be a special OnlyFans kind of explosion.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, that's how I feel about the Beetle, to be fair. So it'd be appropriate.
So this week basically we've learned that we should all start building drift beetles because it's bonkers and probably quite fun actually, to get out there. Bryn's learned something new, which is magical for an episode. Whoever thought that would happen? We might even have to retire his fluffy lab coat. Milton has been confused most of the episode and quiet because of that.
Yeah.
Also, he's changing his name to Stephanie, according to his new logo right next to him.
Yeah, and Depot.
Yeah.
And he's been Matt.
Right.
He's been Bryn. He's been Milton.
Bye.
He's been Sam.
Ciao.
I've been Bam. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that normal stuff. We'll keep that brief this week because Milton did a long emotional speech for you all last week. And we will see you the week after this when we do some sort of episode about some sort of thing.